Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. It was just another Friday night at the office, or so I thought. Little did I know my life was about to change forever. The marketing team had organized a little get-together to celebrate landing our biggest client yet. As a senior software engineer, I didn't usually attend these kinds of events, but my buddy Steve convinced me to go. Come on, Ryan. You've been married to your job for too long. It's time to get out there and meet someone, he said with a wink. I rolled my eyes but agreed to make an appearance, if only to get Steve off my back. As I nursed a beer in the corner, scanning the crowd, that's when I saw her. A stunning brunette wearing a red dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. Our eyes met, and she flashed me a dazzling smile that made my heart skip a beat. Before I knew it, she was sauntering over in my direction. "Well, hello there," she purred. "You must be new around here." I stammered like an idiot, suddenly forgetting how to form a coherent sentence. Yeah. No, not new. I'm Ryan, a software engineer." She let out a melodic laugh that made me weak in the knees. "Aren't you just adorable? I'm Becky, head of marketing." As we talked, I found myself entranced by her confidence and charm. She laughed at all my lame jokes and touched my arm in a way that sent shivers down my spine. When our conversation was interrupted by a call she had to take, I felt a pang of disappointment. But moments later, she was back at my side. "Sorry about that. So, where were we?" We ended up talking for hours, losing track of time until the cleaning crew came to kick us out. I hadn't felt that kind of effortless connection in, well, ever. "We should do this again sometime," Becky said as we parted ways in the parking lot. "Yeah, definitely." I stammered like an awkward teenager. She smirked and reached out to straighten my tie. "I'll be seeing you around, Ryan Mitchell." As I watched her hips sway while she walked towards her car, I knew right then and there that I was done for. From that night on, Becky became a constant presence in my life. We went on date after date, fancy dinners, comedy shows, concerts in the park. With each outing, I felt myself falling harder and harder for this amazing woman. "You're so handsome," she would gush, planting a soft kiss on my cheek. "And brilliant, too. How did I get so lucky?" I would just shake my head in disbelief, wondering the same thing myself. How did a schlubby computer nerd like me land a perfect 10 like Becky Harper? Whatever the reason, I wasn't going to question it. Things progressed at warp speed. Within a matter of months, Becky had practically moved into my place. Her toothbrush sat beside mine in the holder. Her silk nightgown hung alongside my ratty old bathrobes. Though it was a bit overwhelming how quickly she'd ingrained herself into my life, I couldn't get enough of her. So when she not so subtly began hinting about marriage, saying things like, "Don't you think it's time we stopped living in sin?" I realized she was right. What was I waiting for? This woman was my soulmate. I spent weeks agonizing over the perfect ring, scared she would take one look at my sad little offering and laugh in my face. But of course, Becky loved it. Loved everything about me, she insisted. "Yes. Oh my God. Yes, I'll marry you." She squealed in delight when I proposed at our favorite Italian place. We embraced amidst a smattering of applause from the other diners. All those years of loneliness, of watching everyone else couple up while I wasted away alone, it had all been worth it to end up with Becky. At least, that's what I thought at the time. For Becky's birthday, I went all out. I booked us a private table at the fanciest restaurant in the city, ordered the premium wine, the whole 9 yards. I wanted to give her a night fit for a queen. "You really shouldn't have," she gasped when I revealed my surprise. Her eyes were shining with unshed tears of joy. "It's too much." "Nothing's too much for my girl," I said gruffly, pulling out her chair. She let out a girlish giggle and gave me a sound kiss on the lips. "You're such a prince, Ryan Mitchell. However did I get so lucky?" As the night wore on, Becky became increasingly raucous, no doubt from indulging a little too much in the expensive champagne I'd ordered. I excused her first few boorish comments and inappropriate jokes to the wait staff as her just being a happy drunk. But then her behavior took an even uglier turn. "Hey you. Yeah. You with the stupid face. I'm talking to you," she slurred, gesturing rudely at a passing server. "This glass ain't gonna refill itself. Get your ass over here." My face burned with humiliation. "Becky, please keep your voice down." But she was on a roll, cackling and shouting insults as I tried in vain to calm her down. The final indignity came when we were leaving the restaurant, and she spotted a homeless man sitting against the wall outside. "Oh, how precious. A guy just like you, honey," she sneered, digging into her purse. I watched in horror as she pulled out a crumpled tissue and flung it into the poor man's cup. "There you go, buddy. A gift." I wanted to die right there on the spot. Who was this vile, hateful woman, and what had she done with my sweet, loving Becky? On the ride home, I kept shooting her worried glances through the rearview mirror. She stared vacantly out the window, seemingly unaware of her unconscionable behavior. Then, she started mumbling a name over and over under her breath. "Martin, Martin. Who's Martin?" I asked, afraid of the answer. She didn't respond, just kept repeating that name like it was a lifeline grounding her to reality. We didn't exchange another word the rest of the night. As soon as we arrived home, she collapsed into a drunken stupor on the couch. While she slept it off, I allowed my gaze to drift to her purse, sitting abandoned on the coffee table. A tiny voice in my head told me to respect her privacy, but an even louder voice was screaming to find answers. Any answers that could explain away this night of horrors. With shaky hands, I unzipped the purse and pulled out her phone. I couldn't breathe when I saw the kinds of messages and photos she'd been exchanging with some guy named Martin. X-rated pictures, raunchy sexts. It was all there, confirming my worst fear. My wife, my supposed soulmate, had been lying and cheating on me this entire time. Grief and rage welled up inside me as I saved the revolting evidence to her phone. I suddenly hated looking at her unconscious form on the couch, that beautiful face now a mask concealing her true ugly self. Who was the real Becky Harper? And why had she spent the last year meticulously crafting such an elaborate facade just to trap me? The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache, the previous night's events flooding back in vivid detail. I glanced over at Becky, still passed out on the couch, and felt a fresh wave of nausea. How could she do this to me? To us? I paced the living room, working up the nerve to confront her. When she finally stirred awake a couple hours later, I was ready. "Morning, sleepyhead," I said coldly, arms folded across my chest. Becky squinted up at me, looking disoriented. "Ryan? What's wrong, baby?" The endearment made me see red. I pulled out her phone and shoved it in her face, cycling through the incriminating photos and messages. "You want to explain this?" Her eyes went wide as she registered what she was seeing. I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," I sneered. "But save it. I don't want to hear your lies anymore. Becky, or should I call you by your real name?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Ryan, please, let me." "Let you what? Try to manipulate me again? Twist everything around to make me the bad guy?" I was seething, months of deception bubbling to the surface. "This is your true self, isn't it? The rude, selfish, cheating wife you've been all along." Becky's face contorted in anger. "You don't know anything about me," she spat. "If you knew what it was like being married to a pathetic loser like you." "A loser?" My laugh was bitter and humorless. "That's rich, coming from the whore who's been sleeping around behind my back." "Don't act so innocent," she sneered. "At least Martin knows how to satisfy a woman in bed. You're just a limp dick with no stamina." The cruel words hit their mark, dredging up deep insecurities I thought Becky had helped me overcome. Tears of rage and humiliation stung my eyes. "Pack your shit and get out," I said in a low, trembling voice. "We're through. You can't kick me out. This is my house too," she raged, rising unsteadily to her feet. "Like hell it is. It was my house long before you wormed your way into my life with your lies." Becky's mouth twisted into an ugly scowl. "You're going to regret this, Ryan Mitchell. No one does this to me and gets away with it." She stormed to the bedroom, emerging a short while later with an overstuffed suitcase. As she brushed past me towards the front door, I caught a whiff of her sickly sweet perfume, the same scent that used to make my heart race. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Becky hurled the parting shot over her shoulder before slamming the door behind her. Over the next week, I vacillated between unbridled fury towards Becky and utter self-loathing. How could I have been so blind, so desperate for love and companionship that I willfully ignored all the red flags? Part of me hoped I would never have to lay eyes on her again, but a larger, masochistic part yearned for closure, answers, something to make sense of the senseless cruelty she'd inflicted. So when she called and asked to meet for dinner to talk things through, I jumped at the second chance, even as alarms blared in my mind. I knew it was likely a trap, another twisted game she wanted to play. Well, two could play at that game. This time, I would be the one calling the shots. I arranged to meet Becky at her apartment with the hidden intention of gathering rock-solid evidence of her duplicity. I purchased a mini camera and tucked it discreetly into the breast pocket of my shirt, hitting record before knocking on her door. "Ryan," she ushered me inside, putting on a saccharine smile. "I'm so glad you came. Can I get you a drink?" "I'm fine, thanks," I said stiffly, remaining standing. Becky frowned and took a seat on the couch, patting the space beside her. "Won't you sit down? Make yourself comfortable. I'd rather we just cut to the chase. You said you wanted to talk, so talk." She drew in a sharp breath, her facade faltering for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. "You're right, of course. I owe you an explanation at the very least." I braced myself for another torrent of lies and manipulation as she launched into a prepared speech about how things just got out of hand and the magic faded between us. How Martin was just an indiscretion, a mistake she deeply regretted. "So you see, I truly do still care for you, Ryan," she concluded, her eyes brimming with calculated remorse. "If you could find it in your heart to give me one last chance, I promise I'll make it up to you. We can start fresh, like none of this ever happened." Her pleas might have swayed me once upon a time, but now, with a clear record of her deplorable behavior, I could only stare at her in cold revulsion. "You're utterly delusional if you think I'd fall for that load of crap again," I said, rising from the couch. "We're through, Becky. For good this time." In an instant, her entire countenance shifted, like a switch being flipped. The demure, pleading expression contorted into one of pure, feral rage. "You ungrateful bastard," she seethed, leaping up and closing the distance between us. "After everything I did for you, making you feel like a real man for once instead of the pathetic little boy you are." Before I could react, she grabbed a vase off the side table and hurled it at the wall beside my head. It shattered into a million pieces with an ear-splitting crash. "I gave you the best year of my life," Becky raged, snatching up a decorative paperweight as her next improvised weapon. "I played the part of the perfect, adoring wife while choking down Bile every time I had to touch your revolting body." She heaved the paperweight with frightening force, nailing me square in the chest and knocking the wind from my lungs. I stumbled back a few steps, gasping for air. In her manic state, Becky didn't let up. Grabbing fistfuls of her hair, she yanked and ripped at it, shrieking all the while. "But it wasn't enough for you, was it? You had to go and ruin everything like the selfish prick you are." I froze in terror as she turned on her heel and bolted from the room. My instincts told me to run, to flee from this nightmarish scenario while I still could. But I was rooted in place, dizzy from the blow to my sternum, and deep down, some part of me knew I needed to see this through to the bitter, bitter end. The sound of Becky dialing frantically on her phone drifted in from the next room over. Through the open doorway, I spotted her holding the receiver to her ear, her back facing me. "Hello? Police? Please, please help me," she wailed in a tremulous voice. "My husband, he's gone crazy. He's trying to kill me." My stomach plummeted sickeningly as I realized what fresh hell she was unleashing. Becky whipped around, locking eyes with me as faux tears streamed down her cheeks. "Get out, you monster!" she shrieked into the phone. "Get out before I. Then, in one swift motion, she shifted the phone to her other hand and slammed her forehead against the edge of the doorframe with a sickening thud. I cried out in horror as blood sprayed from the wound, staining her face in a crimson mask. Becky collapsed to the floor with a gut-wrenching wail, still keeping up the charade even as she lapsed into unconsciousness. At that moment, The door burst open and two uniformed officers barged inside, weapons drawn and trained directly on me. I threw my hands up in stunned surrender, at a total loss. "On your knees. Hands behind your head," the officer barked, his gun still leveled at me. I complied instantly, my mind racing to make sense of this waking nightmare. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Becky's crumpled form on the floor, deathly still save for the slow spread of blood pooling around her head. What had I done? "Please." I choked out, panic gripping me. "There's been a terrible mistake. I didn't." "Save it for the cops, asshole," the second officer sneered, roughly cuffing my hands behind my back. I grunted in pain as he wrenched my arms, fighting the urge to struggle. The camera. I had to show them the camera. In my pocket, I pleaded. "Please, just check my pocket. I have proof I'm innocent." The first officer's brow furrowed, but he cautiously reached into my breast pocket, extracting the small recording device. Keeping his gun trained on me with one hand, he squinted at the camera's view screen. His eyes widened in disbelief as the footage played out Becky's sham remorse, her eruption of rage, and ultimately her sickening act of self-mutilation to frame me for domestic violence. It was all there, indisputable evidence of her depravity. "Son of a bitch," the officer muttered, slowly lowering his weapon. "This crazy broad really did a number on you, didn't she?" His partner looked equally gobsmacked, releasing his vice-like grip on my arms. Within minutes, backup arrived along with an ambulance for Becky. I sat handcuffed on the floor, dazed, as detective after detective questioned me, scrutinizing the footage over and over again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the battle-hardened female sergeant leading the investigation turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Mr. Mitchell." She expelled a heavy sigh, removing her cap and raking a hand through her graying hair. "I've been on the force 20 years, and I've seen some incredibly messed up things in my time. But this is a new low, even for me." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. I could only nod mutely, still processing the fact that my personal nightmare was finally over. "You've been through a terrible ordeal that no man should ever have to endure," the sergeant continued, her eyes softening just a bit. "And I promise you, we are going to bring the full weight of the law against that woman for what she's put you through." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "But that's not all. I saw the way Officer Jenkins acted toward you when he arrived on the scene." She shook her head in disgust. "Completely unacceptable behavior. Rest assured, he will face consequences for his part in this ugliness." A wave of relief washed over me, shortly followed by overwhelming fatigue. As the on-site paramedics checked me over for injuries, I felt myself starting to emotionally checked out. I had made my statement, shown them the proof they needed to expose Becky's deceit once and for all. Now it was up to the justice system to make sure she could never hurt anyone like this again. There was only one piece of unfinished business remaining. I wanted to press charges against Becky for her litany of emotional and psychological abuses, and against that bastard cop for his unwarranted aggression and rush to assume the worst about me. As the ambulance whisked Becky away and I was loaded into the back of a squad car, I caught her muddied gaze through the tinted windows. Even bloodied and broken, she still looked at me with raw, smoldering hatred. I turned away, sickened. It was over. By whatever means necessary, I would make sure of it this time. The weeks following Becky's arrest were a blur. Between giving statement after statement and attending court hearings, I barely had time to process the magnitude of what I'd survived. But when the day finally came for Becky to stand trial, I was ready to face her once more. This time, bolstered by the strength of the damning video footage and the testimony of the police corroborating her lies and deception. I spent hours on the witness stand, recounting every twisted detail of our relationship under blistering cross-examination from Becky's oily lawyer. He used every underhanded tactic in the book to rattle me, malign my character, and cast Becky as the true victim. "Isn't it true, Mr. Mitchell, that you were the one exercising an unhealthy level of control and manipulation over my client?" he sneered at one point. "That her only crime was daring to step out of the cage you'd created for her?" My jaw tensed with barely contained rage. I opened my mouth to unleash a furious rebuttal, but the prosecution gently cut me off. I believe we've provided more than enough evidence to refute those baseless allegations, she said coolly. Unless you have anything else relevant to present? The shyster lawyer fell silent, glowering at me from behind his weaselly spectacles. When it came time for the jury to render their verdict, you could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. I searched Becky's expression for any hint of remorse, any shred of humanity that might still reside within her twisted psyche. The words I'd been longing to hear, on the charges of fraud, defamation of character, and domestic violence against Ryan Mitchell. We find the defendant, Rebecca Harper, guilty on all counts. Tears of relief stung my eyes as the judge thanked and dismissed the jurors. The judge, a stern older woman with a poker face to match Becky's, turned her attention to my tormentor. Ms. Harper, this court has laid out the facts of your unconscionable conduct in meticulous detail. By your own actions, you have revealed yourself to be a truly depraved individual, devoid of any semblance of human empathy or compassion. For that, you have been found guilty of perpetrating innumerable injustices against an innocent man. Becky sat motionless, betraying no emotion whatsoever. I studied her profile, as if committing her facade of indifference to memory. You will be remanded to state prison for a period of no less than 3 years, with the possibility of parole after 18 months pending a psychological evaluation, the judge declared in clipped tones. Furthermore, you will be required to register as an offender upon your release, and are henceforth prohibited from any direct or indirect contact with Mr. Mitchell. Do you have anything to say before I end these proceedings? She uttered a single, scornful syllable, her voice dripping with venom. Bitch. As deputies moved in to place Becky in restraints, she finally turned to face me. I shuddered, quickly averting my gaze. This shell of a woman was a stranger to me now, and I was suddenly grateful for that. I did not forget about Martin. He won't get away with his sins. I found his social media. A few stalking sessions revealed that the Martin was preparing to host a gender reveal party for their second child later that month. An ugly little thought wormed its way into my mind. What better time to crash their joyous celebration than when they were surrounded by friends and family? This is a terrible idea, my more rational inner voice warned as I pulled up to the quaint little house on the day of the party, evidence of Becky's lurid affair tucked securely into an inside jacket pocket. I shook my head, expelling a sharp breath. I needed this, for closure if nothing else, to gain back a semblance of control after having it stripped from me so utterly by the twin vipers, Becky and Martin. I strode up the front walkway and rang the doorbell before I could talk myself out of it. The door swung open. Can I help you? Hi, I stammered, caught off guard by her genuine aura of warmth and openness. I'm, actually an old friend of your husband's, from out of town. He mentioned your party, and I was hoping I could. Why, of course. The woman's sunny smile stretched even wider as she ushered me inside. Any friend of Jason's is a friend of mine. Let me go grab him for you. Jason? I frowned, confused, as she waddled off down the hallway. So Martin was going by an alias now. How precious. I hovered awkwardly in the entryway, preparing myself to come face to face with the smug bastard. A moment later, there he was, the living, breathing embodiment of all the trauma and turmoil Becky had intentionally inflicted upon me. Well, I'll be damned. A wide grin split Martin's features as he ambled over and grabbed me in an overly familiar bro hug. Ryan Mitchell, what a crazy surprise this is. I went rigid in his embrace, too stunned by his audacity to react. Why he was pretending to know me. How have you been, man? Martin asked, rocking back on his heels. How's your life after, whole thing went down with Becky. Don't say her name to me. I cut him off in a low, trembling tone. The floodgates had opened, and all the pain and rage I'd been carrying came rushing forth in an unstoppable torrent. Don't you dare speak that vile woman's name in my presence again, you son of a bitch. Martin's brows knit together in confusion. Hey, take it easy, bud. I was just, no. Why are you playing a fake friend card with me? I exploded, closing the distance between us. Not after you helped that. That monster tried to destroy me in every way imaginable. The two of you earned my hatred 1,000 times over with your cruel mind games. Realization slowly dawned across Martin's face, his eyes widening in shock. Ryan, I swear, I had no idea what Becky was up to with all that psycho shit. She was always off, you know? But I never thought she'd go to such sicko extremes to save it, I snarled, reaching into my jacket and extracting the incriminating evidence. Printouts of emails between him and Becky discussing how to systematically undermine and gaslight me, lurid photos of their trysts, and transcripts of their texts mocking my shortcomings as a man. I have proof of your whole twisted scheme to ruin me. With a savage, underhanded toss, I flung the damning papers into Martin's face. There's your wonderful Becky in all her glory. The papers fluttered to the ground as Martin stood paralyzed, mouth agape in horror. Peripherally, I was aware of his pregnant wife hovering at the edge of the hallway, one hand covering her mouth as she took in the unfolding scene. You destroyed my life. Knowing she was married, you still started an affair with her. You are a father and still decide to betray your wife. Have some shame. Locking eyes with him, he stood frozen, fueled by a potent mix of disgust and catharsis. My knuckles connected squarely with Martin's jaw. He crumpled to the ground. I stood over his limp form and allowed myself a thin, satisfied smile. This is what you deserve for messing with me. With that, I turned on my heel, shoving past the petrified wife in a blind fury. Never mind the stunned party guests gawking at me from the living room, or the hideous shrieks and muffled sobs now erupting from the foyer behind me. I didn't stick around to face the horrific repercussions of my actions. Not this time. With a final dismissive glance back at the pandemonium I'd unleashed, I turned and stalked back towards my car, leaving that wretched hive of secrets and lies in the rearview once and for all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.